Do you have a story to share with the world? Of course you do. We all have stories to share. An Anchor podcast allows you to share your interests in a way that connects to others all across the globe. If you have been considering starting your own podcast and don't know where to begin, Anchor makes it easy to record, edit, and publish with the click of a button. You can even add music. Whether it's crime dramas, self-improvement, paranormal adventures, or tips about parenting, you too can share your unique imprint on the world. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. You've got this. I believe in you. Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. So I am super excited to share a guest with you today. So Barry Littleton is with us today. Barry is a researcher, a medium, a hypnotist, as well as a near-death experiencer. And Barry and I have been chatting for, a little over an hour at least before we started recording. And some of the information that this man has, you all are just going to love this. But today we're going to really hone in on earthbound spirits and lost souls and why they're here and how we can help them. So Barry, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. So, many of my listeners are aware of my story and how, working in the field of organ and tissue donation for nearly 15 years, I was working in a hospital setting, primarily in the intensive care units, as well as the emergency departments, around people who had been declared brain dead or were progressing on to the family deciding to withdraw life support. And I was experiencing a lot of these earthbound spirits. So working in this hospital setting, I was seeing shadow beings. I was seeing different mists. I was experiencing a lot of intuitive abilities at the time. I was seeing what appeared to be ghosts, or apparitions, what some may say, as well as I was hearing things a lot too. So Barry, what is an earthbound spirit? Can you explain that to us?
Briefly put, a person like you or I, grandma, that does not cross over after the death process, after the dying of the death of the physical body, they still remain. And in saying that, we can break it down 1,000 different ways. But what I've noticed, and I think making it simply said, is there is something about the personality that survives the death process, period, and something that stays here and attached here. And the various things that can have people to stay earthbound are, addictions is a big one. Mm-hmm. Loved ones is a big one. We can't let go of our loved ones when they cross. We don't go. They don't want to go. That keeps someone trapped here. Land is another one, not being able to let go of the land, the place where you live, the house, not being able to let go of routines. These are all things that cause one to run from the light or avoid the light at the point of death. And that's when one can become an earthbound spirit. And at this point now, I've crossed over some that have described me being here hundreds of years, some beyond thousands.
Wow.
And it makes you realize how they don't perceive time as we do. But, when I'm telling me, the whole world's messed up, all the earthquakes, and now it's not even a world anymore. Mm-hmm. They're talking about before all the continents were fully, things like that. That's going way back to be trapped here on Earth, hooking on to other people and living through other people.
Absolutely. And I would see that when the patient would take their last breath, I would witness a mist or some sort of kind of smoke leave the patient's body, and then they would go white, and I would notice that. And I would tell my families to give their loved ones permission to cross over because, like you just said, many of them are earthbound because we, the living, on the living side, hold them here, and it's hard for them to move to the light. So, one recommendation I have for those, if you are experiencing the loss of someone, to really give them permission. And I told my dad this when my grandmother died. She was not letting go. She wouldn't pass. She was 91 years old. She was in a nursing home. We knew it was time. And I told my dad, you need to give her permission to go, to go to the light, to pass. And within 3 or 4 hours after he did that, she had passed on. So I firmly believe in that we as the living can kind of anchor them here, and they want to make sure that we're okay. And then they kind of get stuck,
Mm-hmm. I have a question. You mentioned seeing the mist and everything. Now, just prior to seeing that, did you hear something that my mother and the older people in my life used to call the death shackles? That breathing,
Yes.
when the soul starts dislodging from the physical body. Did you hear that before seeing the mist?
Yes. And sometimes it was like a guppy breathing almost. It was like this, they would take a breath and then not take a breath for a really long time. And then they would take a breath and then they were gone. Or they could be completely incoherent in the room, and the family had withdrawn life support. And then they just sit up in the bed and have a little bit of a conversation, and then they're gone. Like, very weirdly, it's almost they get this little burst of energy sometimes, and then they would cross over and pass on. And I saw a lot of that happen oftentimes, because there were times when families didn't want to be there in the presence when their loved one was being extubated. So I always felt, being an intuitive empath, that I wanted to be there, in their presence, so that they didn't have to go alone, and they would have someone there to kind of assist them and help them cross over. Well, during this process, I didn't really realize that I was doing what's called a shared death experience. I was there with them, crossing over almost in the astral realm. I don't really know how to explain it, but we would keep track of time between the time that they stopped breathing until the time that they passed. And the time that they were recording, that my coworker was recording, was not the amount of time that was adding up to me being kind of not present. So I started to do some research on this phenomena. And there's actually a lot of books out there and information from palliative care, doctors, about this shared death experience and helping them cross over. So I know I had listened to a couple of your YouTube channel or your YouTube videos about your experiences with assisting people crossing over. And I was like, I got to get Barry on my show, because this is something that I've dealt with all those years that I worked in the hospital, but I never talked about it with people. It was like I was seeing things, experiencing things, but I was afraid to kind of share it because I felt a little crazy. Is anybody else seeing this stuff? But I never really even told my friends or family about it. It was like my little kind of closeted thing that I was experiencing.
There's a lot of things that can lead to that too, especially like for me, as I found over the years. Now, this happens to many, especially young people. I got attacked by a disincarnated person in a house. I was about 7 years old. This thing attacked me, and I could say not all of them are strong enough to do that, but this one I think is one of those people that was some type of a molester or something like that in life, had a lot of negativity, and then when they transition, they become something worse. And it wanted me out of that house. We were down this basement, and it was a place my uncle was renting, and in the basement had these several old like Maytag washer and dryer. It must have been like the first models, but it felt really cold down there. It felt bad. And then I got this bear hug. And just like when your football friends ran up to you in high school and put a bear hug on you from behind, and when anything constricts you like that, you automatically, and then I started telepathically getting this, you're not welcome, leave, not welcome. And I started feeling hate. You know what I mean? And now I know that a lot of times these earthbound spirits like that, they can't join with the person that they're trying to. And so they see this beacon of light, and what they want to do is suppress your ability to use your abilities or discourage you from using it. Just the same thing you would do a bully that would push around a kid, to the point of where when I got a little older, I wanted walking by that house. Uncle didn't live there, but staying out there going, you punk, try it now. I mean, stuff,
Once you learn your abilities. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's something that happens, I think, so often that discourage us from using our gifts, and something I'll touch on too is the two different types of earthbound spirits I've dealt with. One is the earthbound spirits are attached to the outside of a person's energy field. They may be hitchhikers and attached, but they're still on the outside. Those earthbound spirits I can get to give me survival evidence or whatever it is to give to the person for the message that they're attached to. They always want something normally, okay? Yeah. And none of them are not being acknowledged like they'd like to be. Then the other type of earthbound spirit is inside the energy field. so much inside and entwined into the energy field at a specific point on a person's body where they're harboring trauma, which is cellular, and our organs hold emotion, cellular trauma also that can be looked up, that's scientifically proven. They join at these places. Okay, and that creates a number of things. It can be health problems, other things, but they express themselves through the person, the living person, as negative behavior patterns.
Yes.
Normally, the ones that kept them trapped here, kept them bound here, normally will come out. So that's addiction's a big one. You get somebody who gets a spirit in them that is an alcoholic, and the person that's taking this being in already has a genetic disposition to it. To a degree, I've had one tell me that joined with a client at this bar, jumped them at the jukebox where they're watching a Chiefs game, okay? Jumps them, and it starts telling me, well, the other people in there are kind of old and used up, meaning that they've jumped all the bar, small bar, jumped them all several times, and this client comes in, they're bright. So they were bright, they were different. They got by the jukebox, that's my area, so I just joined with them because I wanted to show they weren't having a good time. They're socially awkward, and I wanted to show them how to have another drink. But their main thing when they died on the street trying to get back to the bar for last call was, oh, one more drink. And they had a heart attack just before they could get over there. So they started haunting the bar, haunting their house across the street. Those were kind of their spots. Jumps this client and then starts enticing them to go having drinks, even initiating like an alcoholic pattern for them through genetic disposition. And you know what this Earthbound spirit says to me? They can really put them away though. And when I get them to drink enough to black out, I feel the most alive.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, and that's trauma.
I can relate to that because working in the hospital, I felt, we can talk about that. How do we know when we've had these earthbound spirits attached to us? Because I know for me, I felt physically drained. My thoughts were negative, right? Mm-hmm. I had negative spiraling in my thoughts. I had severe pain in my body, almost like severe fibromyalgia, very significant lower back pain. I would have food cravings, things that I didn't normally eat. I would crave weird foods. And those are just a few of the things that I noticed when I started to recognize that our energy field is being kind of bombarded. I call it the Swiss cheese aura. So if you look at our aura, like a piece of Swiss cheese, and it's got these holes in it, and then these energies can kind of burrow in those holes and really just latch in, and kind of attach to you without you even knowing it. And working in, an addiction or a hospital setting, your vibration will lower because you're in a state of grief or loss or stress or frustration or whatever it may be. So it makes it easier for these energies or entities to kind of latch on and attach. But you talked about feeling cold. What are some other, examples of how you can tell that they're attached to you?
Real quick, something else I want to throw in here is that I'm dealing and talking about really releasing. And what I'm talking about is the level of earthbound spirits. People like grandma, us that don't cross over. I'm not even taking it as low as the demonic level. I'm not even talking about that here and dealing with that exactly. Yeah. But with what you said about the Swiss cheese aura, I like that caricature.
Better.
Yeah. Word. Maybe a little, like talking earlier, little blue cheese. Anyway.
Everything's cheese related.
Okay, I'll forget what I'm thinking about. When dealing with those negative forces, though, and the Swiss cheese analogy, for people like you and I and a lot of your viewers that know how to protect themselves and are well protected. And I'll use the analogy of Star Trek, and like the Enterprise is here, and it's being bombarded by several Klingon or Romulan ships, like 4 or 5, all putting stress on the shields, firing at once. And what they do, negative forces do to protect people like us, is they create this firing is arguing with loved ones, a sibling or a spouse.
Anybody, a spouse.
Okay, yeah. Problems at work. Financial stresses, bad one. Like for example, like a lot of the haunted houses I've been in, they traditionally have plumbing problems. Always have plumbing problems. That black crap in the plumbs, and they get these stops, or these kind of weird ash on the walls. It's very thin, but it's like, well, what? Stuff like that. And then what that is an attempt to cause financial stress. And if that doesn't work, then they move out in the garage and move into the fluids of the car, like the transmission and the fluids there cause you problems, more financial stress. Okay. And they're stressing the shields from all these different vectors. And what that does is create these little small, for us that really know how to protect ourselves, just these little cracks, not quite the Swiss cheese holes, but these little cracks, just enough for them to kind of slither in a little bit of energy. And then they go right for the heart chakra immediately. And they do that. Then they start jumping other people we know, coming in our dreams, people we know, yelling at us. Yeah. So
my cat would hiss at me when I would come home from work if I had a heavy case, like a murder or something. I remember one time specifically, my cat attacked me and hissed at me. I didn't, but they can speak through our animals. Yeah.
And something veering over a little. Sorry, I jump around a little. So, go with me. I'll try not to get too far off topic like I do. But the hospital and what I have encountered with these spirits that are earthbound spirits inside the energy field, only coming out in behavior patterns as a medium, and nobody I know, we can't detect it. They're not on the outside of the energy field. It's different. So like when I will actually release one, it's when someone is in nearly deep theta, not quite delta, but deep theta hypnotic state. These dead people will come forward. They will, talk to you. A lot of times I found also, without knowing the love of God, the love of the Creator, that they seem to forget. And we have so many different religions and things that mess up our personal idea of what God is, and just loving that. It's really a problem. But then I've had, I can see, let's say, angels in a room, a portal open, and the client has not seen it yet. The dead person has not seen it yet. But then when I start reminding them of the love of God, the love, they start seeing the light again. They start seeing angels that were already present in the room. And then they cross over. And for the most part, these earthbound spirits I talk to, they cross over fairly easy. Not all of them, but the ones I dealt with yesterday weren't very easy. But most of them go very easy, And it says something. Like I had one that was resisting a little bit. He tells me the first thing is the male coming out of a female, their voice changes. It's real weird to see such a nice person start talking like a trucker all of a sudden, trying to say,
I've witnessed that before.
Yeah. Say you didn't, but yet they're like a flopper. They're on the thing like that, but they're still communicating. And it says, you didn't know I was here. And I said, oh, I had a pretty good idea, and you're trying to trick me. I said, what am I trying to do? You're gonna try to get me going to that light. I'm not going to that light. I'm not going to that light. And I said, well, why not? You can't stay with a client either. You're ruining their life, so why didn't they go to light? Well, because in that light, I'm gonna have to change. In fact, there was that one spirit, and in there, I can't get another drink.
Interesting.
That's that heavy. You know what I mean? Or another situation where an earthbound spirit is telling me, talking about another individual, saying that individual looks like they did before. They've got the tall hair. They're tall. They've got the dark hair, yada, yada. And this earthbound spirit that's joined with the client is going after this individual that they know from another lifetime.
Interesting.
But for the client, it's ruining their marriage, making them go after an individual that they're not even attracted to. When an earthbound spirit is gone, they're very aware of that. So, that's a big problem. We don't even want to admit and talk about past lives. And yet alone healing trauma that we carry from one life to another, and some of us in the cellular from our ancestors. Anyway, sorry, going back to the hospital.
Awesome. Which it reminds me, Barry, of Dexter and how he talks about his dark passenger. I don't know if you've seen that show, but
never watched it.
A murderer. He murders supposedly bad guys or whatever, but he talks a lot about his dark passenger and how that's what creates him or makes him become.
Is that Elijah Wood? Is that the one that's Elijah Wood?
No, I don't even know his name, but Dexter Morgan. It's a very, it's been out for years and then they just came out with a new one, but that's what it kind of reminds me of, because he talks a lot about he's a normal guy, but then he has these moments where the dark passenger takes over. And then the dark passenger is transferred down to his son. So now his son is having these same types of, experiences that he wants to kill and murder. And so it's like, it can really be applied to anything. It can be applied to addictions, food, cravings, weight gain,
people,
gosh, there's so
addictions.
many.
And another one, a big one. I don't want to leave this out. Another one, when the spirit will tell me, Earthbound spirit, I ran from the light. One is they felt cheated. Their life, the shock of it. Number two, and this one comes up a lot. I thought maybe it was hell. I've done some things to people in my life or practiced dark arts or something that I'm worried that it's going to be judgment. I'm going to go in there and burn. That is a big one. Just the auto-suggestion of hell is enough to keep people from going into that light. And then you've got people in the community. I did something about this, and I know some people got upset with me. Excuse my language, the hell with it, be mad, break and present the criteria I offered to me even to argue with you. These people telling people don't go into the light. Don't go into the light. It's a trap. You're going to reincarnate. You're a trap. That is horrible advice, Tanya.
Terrible.
Horrible.
Terrible.
And I've even heard them telling people, go into the darkness because it's melanin and you'll get information. No. Consistently on over 100 of these I've crossed over now, they're almost all telling me the same thing. It's dark here. It's dark here. Then you start talking about the love of God, the love of their family. They start seeing angels there. So the love and the light are connected. No way around it. Now, when we first, I think, first encounter death, okay? And I can only speak from kind of what happened to me in my personal near-death experience. I think at first it's like if we get a real rapid eye movement sleep, a deep sleep that goes like, you're laid out like even over 8 hours, like 9 hours, you're laid out, 10 hours. When that alarm goes off, for just a second, for like the first minute, you're kind of just hazy. Then you get up and go on with your work, your day. When death first hits us, I believe that same type of shock and haze is there. And something about the death process wants our life memories. Something about it will take that, our life memories, and that creates a problem for not crossing over.
Interesting.
And this is one of those things. And going back to the hospital, I want to make sure I don't miss this because they're telling me to please. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
no, it's good information.
Take it easy. Okay.
Drawbacks of being a medium.
In the hospital, I've dealt with a lot of earthbound spirits that attached at the hospital. And some of them will attach to a loved one or just a person in the hospital based on they see the damaged energy field that they're hurting and they want to try to help. Some of them have told me that they saw it as a chance to reincarnation, especially the ones that describe to me, always been with them, that they join with the person in the incubator room. And that the incubator rooms are standing room only for people trying to join with these babies. And that's terrifying. I mean, when you get a situation, and I don't want to upset anyone here, okay? But when you do get a situation, let's say you have a male baby in this incubator room without a solid energy field, because most of us don't practice that, wrapping our children, our newborns with the energy shield. That's not just taught in our society very much. It's not over here. So you have that, and you have a female that's been roaming a long time, attaches to this male in the incubator room, and they grow up thinking they were always a woman. And does that get you a Caitlyn Jenner? I'm not saying that's the only reason for transvestitism. I'm not saying that, but it might be a big factor. I remember seriously when I was a kid, the first box of Wheaties I ever got to have, not enough sugar on there, but it was Bruce Jenner with his hands up, triathlon, and all that. And now I even remember him being on Chips. He took over when Eric Estrada got hurt, and not very long, but I'm thinking now, but then he's saying now, well, that was Caitlyn doing all that. She won the triathlon and everything. But is that an example of that, where a person grows up so much with the earthbound spirit that they think it's them?
That's interesting.
That's
absolutely an interesting perspective. Yeah. And that kind of throws us into the topic of walk-ins. And now I didn't really know what I was seeing at the hospital when I was witnessing this, but until I started doing my quantum healing hypnotherapy with Dolores Cannon, right? A lot of her work. Cool. She talks about walk-ins being, it's almost like when a soul will choose to exit the body and then a new soul will enter. And when you're talking about it being in the incubator room, right? she talks a lot about how oftentimes the baby's soul, they have a choice. They have a choice to come in the mom's womb, or they can wait until they're being born to actually enter into the baby's physical body. And I was witnessing this specifically during codes, like when patients were being resuscitated. So it's when they were coding, I was noticing a mist leaving the body. And then I would notice as they coded and the person started to get their breathing back, something else. It's like, so when it was different, it was hard to tell, because for me, I was seeing a variation in color and texture. So it didn't look like the same mist or the same smoke. It was different. So I didn't know what that was. And I was like, And it was years and years later when I read about this walk-in. So when you bring up the babies in the incubator rooms, it makes you wonder if that's when some of these walk-in earthbound souls are kind of attaching. Or it's almost like you have a brand new Rolls Royce and you're driving through town, and then you leave it wide open in the area and everybody's trying to jump into it, right? It's like, it's a free for all. It's, and that's how our avatar is. It's like, you've got a physical vessel here that a soul or a consciousness wants to dive in. And I've heard that you can actually have several different ones that can kind of take over. And is that or multiple personality into play,
Well, I can give an example. One is, a lot of people thought after my accident, when I came forward with public, people started thinking, well, he must be a walk-in. No, I'm not a walk-in. It's still me for getting after. But in my life, I have experienced a real walk-in. It was an older lady by the name of Tamar, no longer with us. And she was a contactee / a walk-in. And she was older. When I say that, probably in her 70s. And when you were talking to her, she would be talking normal. And all of a sudden she goes, and then start talking like a little girl. And look, I was just getting my psychology degree. I was getting really close. I see this lady doing this. I'm thinking, okay, this ain't no walk-in. This is Sybil. This is Sally Field, and multiple personality disorder. But then during a conference she had in her house, this gentleman by the name of Randolph Winters came to speak, that was well-known, spent a lot of years with Billy Myers. And I and my ex wanted to see his pictures based on experience we'd had and ships we'd seen. Were they the same, Anyway, at the end of this conference, and they did a little circle, the two psychics in there, they did 3, she was 1. I get taken back to this room. In this room, this woman Tamar has these big collages of about 12 beings on them each, with different colors behind them, really good illustrations. And then this little girl comes in with this other psychic I'm talking to, and talking to this little girl, and starts saying things about my contact experiences that I never told to anyone. This is a long time ago. This is like in the 90s, okay? Probably about 95, 96. This walk-in said they were from, it wasn't quite somewhere we would be familiar with, but it was somewhere similar to near Sirius, I want to say, okay? And that this woman, Tamar, had gotten really injured and had a chance to almost died and a chance to leave, but the walk-in offered to take the body. Yeah. And then she decided not to leave, so they shared the consciousness, shared the body. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, nothing. And once I got past my Sally Field analogy,
it's true.
It was very, very real, because there's no way that little girl could have known that, to the point she's saying, you're hurting people up there. What are you talking about? So you said you would never do that, but when they come, you run. And I had just had experience. I was practicing this thing called the gate of power, and when you get done, it shuts off the internal dialogue. And I get done, I'm seeing a craft manifest out there, and I was already suffering from several adult experiences. These things get too close, you start missing hours and hours of time. Even though it doesn't feel like it was a negative experience, it's disconcerting. Mm-hmm. It's hard to operate in our normal mode, experiencing this stuff. So anyway, just that's my whole deal about walk-in. But back to the hospital real quick. One of the more recent Earthbounds I crossed over was a lady that came forward, and I could tell she was a church lady when she's coming through the client. And they start saying, well, the client had went in for a surgery, and this earthbound spirit is saying, well, I got to get home, and I joined with them. I was trying to help, but I got to get home, and I joined with them, and I was the only one strong enough. All the others trying couldn't do it. And this is a client that knew how to protect themselves. And before I crossed them over, I said, you said several times all of us in here were trying to join. How many
are there?
How many are in there? And what she says is between 33 and 55.
Wow.
And that threw me for a slight loop. I was like, whoa, okay, that's not even an incubator room. And we've got that many. And when I say that, there's no doubt in my mind that the amount of earthbound spirits, the population is as numerous as the living. I've crossed the last two I crossed over. One of them described to me being in from another land, a journeyman, and everything was fine till he walked into that city and got stabbed by that bull. There's a bunch of bulls running out for free, and this big bull thought it was the enemy and killed him. And he had not crossed over from there. This individual was describing to me the first Bolero in Spain.
Interesting.
That's like 1790.
Uh-huh.
And other ones telling me
they've been holding on that long. They must just jump from when the person dies, then they just jump to the next person that they can find. I mean, is that what happens?
Yeah, I guess reverence, they finally get to another land, which is here. I've had another one telling me, Tanya, that they were upset. They said, you understand, the world's not the same. All those earthquakes, and then everything's wrong because the world's all messed up. It's not even a world anymore. But they're talking about before all the continents were fully separated. Mm-hmm. They've been roaming this earth as an earthbound spirit for, you know what I'm saying, millions of years, perhaps.
That's really sad, because when I was experiencing this in the hospital, I had an office that was in an old hospital, and it was off, kind of not near the units. And I'd have to go in late at night, right, by myself at 3 a.m. in this really old hospital. Well, I'd be sitting there at my computer doing my work, and I would start to hear footsteps outside. No one was out there. I'd hear disembodied sounds, whispers. My pen would fly across the table, or maybe a chair would spin or move, or something would fly off the desk. And these were things I wasn't sharing with anyone, because it was just, when you start to talk about it, it becomes real. I didn't want to make it real, so I kind of kept it to myself. And I would just pick up my stuff and head over to where other people were, right? Well, now I realized that they were communicating with me. They wanted to make it known that they were there, because how do I know now that those people haven't been trapped there for hundreds of years, or however long this hospital, or even the land? They could have been attached to the land that the hospital was built on. And so, Barry, how can we help people? How can we help, first of all, people who've got these attachments? And then second of all, how can we help the earthbound cross over? And I know, there's many different ways that we can do this. And tell a little bit about your technique and how you help these people.
I use cognitive behavioral for professionally. That's the model that I went to school for, that I have used always with clients, human clients, especially youth. I dealt with adjudicated youth quite a bit for most of my professional career, also at-risk youth kids. And it's cognitive behavioral that actually seems to produce the best effects, the most positive. When dealing with earthbound spirits, I use cognitive behavioral also. And it's really on the earthbound spirit I'm using it on, opposed to the client there, like this, talking, the person coming out of. And I find that it's even more effective on earthbound spirits than the living. And something else, and I want to put special emphasis on this, since we're talking about earthbound spirits, like I said before, and not the demonic, not that level. We're talking about the earthbound spirits, people we know that don't cross. Okay. Many oftentimes they're unacknowledged.
Yes.
Okay. And when I say that, like one of the spirits I was telling it, when I start mentioning God and love of God, don't talk about God. I don't hear about that. I didn't even know God, and I don't think God's real.
They're disconnected.
Well, because if there was a God, we wouldn't all be here almost bumping into each other, and you all wouldn't be ignoring us forever.
Interesting.
We sometimes think that our caricature of hell is us shoveling sulfur into a acid pit while a pig demon stabs us in the butt with a pitchfork. That's got to be hell, right? But but in reality, what that being was describing was pretty much a hell type of deal to me, and a situation to me.
They're trapped.
You know?
They're trapped.
And and I've had people tell me, what do you know? What happens when you go into light? Well, I do know one thing. All right, one thing is it can be a male in a female's body, and they're living through them, and then they get to go into the light, and they have loved ones that have come out of these portals with angels, and you can see them. They're younger than what they were when they passed, and they have a body of their own sex. And for whatever reason, it may not be that way over there, but here it's perceived that way.
Interesting.
So a lot of times they will, go for that reason, loved ones. And so I can say this, people say, what happens when you go into the light? I know one thing that happens. It can be like maybe a Jimmy Stewart thing. You go in there and get your wings, because some of them come back out, and they can do that. And none of the earthbound spirits or ghosts I've encountered can use it. Well, the ghosts can, some of them, but those are more demonic, but none of the earthbound spirits I've encountered can use these portals, not voluntarily anyway.
Yeah.
And how come they can when they go in the light and come back? So something different's going on. There's a change going on that's serious. And I've seen something that you described. I've seen some of these earthbound spirits turning into mist before they go fully into the light. They're already getting another body or whatever, another container for consciousness. We'll call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's real important in the hospital. And something I wanted to ask you. Okay, you mentioned organ donation. Now, something I've always been interested in is that I've heard some people, one that I know, actually a family member, that has had organ transfers and they start actually like having dreams about people they've not met.
Yes.
They start having things that are like these weirdly, like one person I know, they're working up every Monday night. They're watching Monday Night Football and eating a big old pizza they should have been eating, but they just couldn't help it. And this individual is like me. I don't like football. Somebody had brain injuries, not my sport. Okay. Anyway, so they're like me.
And that does happen, Barry.
Yeah.
I wish I would have written a book back when I was working with all these recipients, because I had so many stories, but I can share one story that was very specific to that. And I firmly believe that our organs carry the energy or the imprint, blueprint of the DNA of that particular person, right? So I had one guy, he was in his 50s when he got a heart transplant from a young 16-year-old girl who was in a car accident. And within days of him getting this heart transplant, he started to be obsessed with the color pink, obsessed, wearing it, putting it on. And this falls into that walk-in concept that we were just talking about. But we started calling him Pinky. I mean, this guy, he was a hunter. He was this really masculine dude. And then now he just can't wear enough pink, Well, he had never met the donor family. So in organ donation, you have to have consent from the recipient family, or the recipient as well as the donor family. There has to be consent for them both to meet. Well, years went on and he finally got consent, and they planned to meet at the donor family's home. When he met the family, he went into the young 16-year-old girl's room, and guess what color her room was? All pink. And I've heard stories of, some of my recipients would get a kidney transplant, and then they started craving Mexican food. And for years, they had Mexican food cravings. And then they met the donor family.
Totally.
Found out they were Hispanic. Yes.
So, like the person they tell me, they say, I was eating this pizza. I shouldn't be eating it with the transplant I have. I couldn't help it. And then they tell me, but then I'm always having these dreams about people. They pop up in my dreams. Then they go meet the donor's family. Donor's family says his favorite thing to do was to eat pizza on Monday night. That was his thing. And also all these people that were his immediate family members were the people they've been dreaming about. Yeah. So I think it says a lot about how much.
Like, what is that? Is that an attachment?
I think it's the cellular memory. That memory exists in every individual nuclei at the cellular memory. It's cellular level, definitely. And I think that's really important when thinking, when transporting actually organs and the vibration of things and what we are. We're so much more than what we're taught, and what we understand, especially when we're beings of consciousness and awareness. And that means something, definitely. Our strength level and everything else.
I think, working in that field, it was so draining and so rewarding at the same time. It was like this push and pull for me. And especially being an intuitive empath and being able to pick up things through my senses more than the average person, I experienced a lot of things. I had one story where I could sense when someone went to the light and someone didn't go to the light. It was almost like their mist was brighter. And then I would see like a little black, like an orb almost. I don't know how to explain it, but it was brighter when they would exit the body. Versus I have a friend who is very intuitive. She doesn't really understand that she's super intuitive, but she is. She would tell me, she worked really heavily with the families, and she would be like, there was different energies within that patient's body. There was more than one energy in that patient's body. And at the time, I didn't know what she was talking about. But now I think she was picking up on that, exactly what you were just saying. And there were times in the operating room when we would be working on, we had a little child who had died. And I had a nurse who freaked out in the operating room and took off out the door. And I went to go talk to her, and she had said that she saw the soul of the baby, of the child, hovering over, and it scared her to death. And I'm like, at the time I had shut off that ability of mine because it was too much. And she was clearly, her pineal gland was very open in order to be able to see, those things on that level. And so you question how many of us in healthcare are experiencing these things, but are not talking about it,
two things I'll throw in there. One is, I use this movie as a frame of reference a lot because there's so many good points in it. That movie Ghost. Yes. You remember he went to the hospital. He followed his body into the hospital, and that old man sat down by him, and they were sitting there. Everyone said, "Oh, he's not gonna make it. No, he's not gonna make it over there either." And said, "He's going. Here they come." He's like, he's lucky. It could have been the other ones. You do look at the other ones. He said, "Oh, you'll know when you see them."
Interesting.
Little things like that. And something else I want to point out in that movie. After the theater they were at, he got in a fight in the alley with Willie, whatever his name was.
Yeah.
And he was chasing after him. And he turns around, he gets away, he turns around and goes back to Demi Moore, and she's there holding his body. He goes in a type of shock. And then he starts having like a panoramic life review. I went through something like that myself, where your life flashes in front of you. He's watching them like move this statue she had, and then he's looking at her in the bed, and the light comes. And suddenly he's back in the street, and he's going, "What is this?" And he sees the light, and then the orbs start coming towards him. He turns back and looks at her, looks at the light. No. And he turns around and starts running. It doesn't take very long before he goes out. And I've had earthbound spirits describe that to me. They run from the light, they get away from it, and it goes out fairly quickly. I don't know what the time frame is, but I think that's very relevant to think about that. And it's a matter of sometime I think we lose the love feeling. It's more of a shock. And we're still so accustomed to living in these senses, in these bodies. We can't let go, and it goes out. You know what I mean? It comes back if you can get the earthbound spirit to remember love and things of that nature and connection, but they're lost until that point.
They are, and especially if it's a trauma, if it's something that 1 minute they're fine, and then they're in a shooting or a car accident or a blunt force to the head, something that they didn't expect, and then their soul is kind of lurched out of their body, and then they're just hovering there in the hospital over their body, not really recognizing what's happening. Anita Morjani, are you familiar with her? She's had, she talks a lot about her near-death experience. She had stage 4 cancer, I believe, and she left her body, and she remembers, and I was always consciously aware of this when a patient was in a coma or declared brain dead, because I was always consciously aware that their spirit or soul could be hovering there and listening to every word that we would say. And she talks about this. She talks about how she had stage 4 cancer and her soul left the body, and she was watching everyone in the room. And when she came back into her body after her near-death experience, she was able to tell every single person that was in there what they did and what they said. And she remembered all of that. And I was always consciously aware of that anytime I had discussions with the family or the doctor, we would step outside. So that way, if they were there and if they were to come back into their body, it was important for us to recognize that they are still consciously there, from their soul standpoint. So, when and you being a near-death experiencer, do you remember any of that when you were in that coma? Do you remember anything that was going on in the physical world?
Some things. First, I took 4 catastrophic traumatic brain injuries: hematoma to the front lobe, hematoma to the brainstem, hematoma to the cortical lobe, and diffusal axonal, which is similar to a shaken baby syndrome and blood spotting of the brain. So when I had my near-death experience and when I had clearing out, remembered who I was, even after I woke up, it took about a month for me to remember who I was. But I spent a great deal of time analyzing, one, the angelics that I saw, which I will call, like the Uranta book calls them, suprananophim, which is like a type of archangel, but they're different. I mean, these were beings that were not, they had somewhat a humanoid deal, just so I could recognize that, but these were pure light. Strands of thousands of light surrounded by these shields. Okay. And I had to kind of try to figure out the type of these were regal beings, and the love frequency I felt coming from them was so strong that I swear to you, a little bit more, they must have been holding back, or it would have burned up my body. I don't think we can take it, like spontaneous combustion, So yeah, so that's one thing, definitely. So I had to kind of try to separate that and see exactly what I was dealing with. But even before I remembered who I was, I could still see these angels in my mind's eye. And when I had died, I saw my loved ones, my grandmother, my uncle that we had just buried a couple of days before this accident, and he was actually communicating with me. Now my grandmother wasn't. She's standing behind at this complex we're at, and she's kind of blinking like an owl. While he's communicating with me, he's saying, man, I've crossed over, you don't remember, but you get hurt like you did recently, you'll be here with us. And, I was arguing him because he was dressed so ridiculous, and but it wasn't like a vision. It's like talking to you now. It wasn't like a vision. And, I thought that's probably when I had actually had this near-death experience and cleared out. I came up in this rehab at this, the fall risk bed at this physical rehab place. And, and my mother told me before she passed, she said, you keep saying that that's when you had this near-death experience, when you came to and remembered who you were in the hospital. She said, whatever happened to you when you were before that coma. She said, because when they said you were awake weeks later, your eyes would just roll back in your head for like a minute a day, but they said you were conscious. And when you finally started talking, you started talking about Reggie, who's my uncle, and you kept saying purple angel, again and again. And, that's because one of the colors of the purple angels I saw was purple. So that much I had to take forward and kind of use when I was normal, kind of when I spoke to doctors about this, kind of taking it, how much of this was the last oxygen in my brain being processed, how much of it was any of these scientific explanations for near-death experience. And the only thing I could tell them is, hey, look, reality is real to the perceiver. And if I had not ended up staying there, or be coming back here, I would be there, period. So say what you want, and something else I want to throw in on here, because they're on me. They want me to mention this, even though it's not specifically about earthbound spirits. The hospital and the MRI and X-ray machines.
Okay? Oh, I have it on my list of us to talk about.
And how that happened for me is I'd heard things. And how I first heard it was actually I was Art Bell fan, okay? And this is going all the way back to the 90s. I was to Coast when he first started that. But one of the nights he was talking about a person called in talking about MRI machines and having entities attached to them. They're a tech operator. And then all these people started calling in. He got blown up. And, before, it's like 2017, I was one of those people that just couldn't get my wisdom teeth removed. So I had to get one removed. And this X-ray thing, I'm moving around in it, and there's a technician, lady about a little bit younger than me, nice looking. I had said, I've heard things about MRI machines and entities, and it's an odd thing to say to anyone. You're just sitting there, and she turns around, and looks at me, her eyes are like that big, and she's like, "Where'd you hear that?" I was like, "Oh, well, I'm a weird guy, I hear stuff, And she says, I actually am an MRI operator, and I've changed. I do X-rays now, but I used to run the MRI machine in the hospital where I live. And then she described it being in a basement in a wing of the hospital that was completely almost condemned. Mm-hmm. She thought that was odd. And then she says this. She said there are beings that come through are attached to those, and they're different. She said the ones with the x-rays, they're like shadows, they're flinting. She said, but the ones that are with the MRI machine, she goes, they followed us home. Several of us talked about going home and having nightmares. And it's something about those are stronger that come through the MRI machine. And, you know, as simplistic as that is, I think it was very vital information. How much of the electromagnetic frequencies of these devices are portals that bring in some of these different beings from different realms.
Interesting. And a hospital full of that electromagnetic.
Yeah. A point where the doctor comes in and we must have funny looks on our face, so the energy was just intense in the room. She's like, what are you guys talking about? She says, oh, x-ray machines and like ghosts. And the doctor looks at me, looks at her eyes get me. She says, hey, look, I just got an MRI yesterday.
Oh, no.
You're going to be pulling the truth out of my head? Okay, I won't talk no more about it. Anyway, just interesting. I just wanted to bring that up because I know you've worked around a lot of those machines.
Yes.
I just think it's fascinating, you know, and to hear it, as I was told, even there, amongst the texts themselves, that is like sacred. You almost don't talk about it.
Interesting. And I think that's it. We in healthcare see things, but our scientific mind wants to overrule it and say, that's not, I would see shadow beings and I'm like, no, that's not a shadow being, whatever, that was just
beings around the MRI. Did you see beings around the machines?
Yes. And I would see beings around the bedside, and there was your physical beings there, people. But then I would see some misty kind of lights and things there. And at this time, I was seeing so much, it was too overwhelming. So I literally went home one day and wrote someone had told me, you don't have to see this stuff, you can shut it off. So I was like, all right. So I went home and wrote an entire thing. I don't want to see this anymore. And then I kind of blessed it and shoved it in a drawer. Well, once I started to learn about my energy field and I started to learn that I had these attachments and that I needed to raise my vibration, release these trapped emotions, move through the trauma, I noticed that these attachments just started to dissolve, off of me. I started reading what I called a clear out script. Every single day I left the hospital, I would sit in my car and I would read this clear out script. And it was basically just calling my sovereignty and my power back into my body and not giving permission for any of these energies to attach to me. And so I do encourage people, if you're out there, I've got some friends who are paranormal investigators, and they aren't privy to any of this stuff, or mostly not. And so I do encourage people to cleanse your equipment, cleanse yourself, and call in the light, do a light bath, or, and it's different than what you talk about. Some of the ones that are more ingrained, I'm talking more about the Swiss cheese ones, the ones that just kind of latch on, the hitchhikers, so to speak.
Something about, I feel somebody out there talking about protection, and they're one thing, the protection, you can look it up online. You've got 1,000 people with 1 billion different protection techniques. And one that works for me is super simple. It is called a solar plexus sun. Now you see a sun of like white, yellow, Christ conscious energy, energizing, turning clockwise, and illuminating your biofield, your aura, and energizing your aura. And it's imperative that people understand our biofield, our aura, is our immune system against attachments, period. You know what I mean? So it's very important to keep them solid. And another one that you mentioned, and I say this a lot, there's something about in these bodies when we put something into voice, into verbal, into sound. And when having a mantra like that, even if it's just a sentence or two that you can go over twice a day, that is a protection of it, using a little joyous humor. The negatives don't like loving humor. I don't know what it is. They can't vibrate at that frequency. Yeah. Crack a loving joke around some demonic entities, they're gone, man.
You're right. And they say that when you're in a fearful state, to laugh because it raises your vibration. And it really comes down to, you won't have these attachments if you're not vibrating in that frequency.
And
I was in the hospital at the time,
when reading those mantras like that, what it does also, not just encourage attachments to be removed, but it changes your energy field to where you're not palatable to these inorganic beings that are negative, to these earthbound spirits. It's the deterrent. So it's important, and I hate to say it, as much as it sucks, people like us, we got to do our protections 3-4 times every day.
We do.
It's a
especially if we're
pain,
working with
but you
clients.
got, you just got to do it though, and
Yeah.
anytime you don't is ability to leave cracks or Swiss cheese holes, whatever. Yeah.
So Barry, I love to use sound to clear as well, like the solfeggio frequencies. And I'm going to do a podcast on this because I think it's important to know, there's 9 different tones that, 528 hertz, 432 hertz, 417. There's a variety of them. And I will play those. I started to play those in the office where I would hear those spirits, and I began to realize I wasn't hearing them anymore. I was noticing, and I think it's because I was shifting the energy, not only my energy, but the energy in the area as well. Because most people are privy to when you have to clear energy through saging and, Palo Santo, which is great. Those are awesome tools. But I do feel like there's things that we can do without having to do the physical, activity of lighting the sage and doing that. Now, if you like doing that, my sister, she does it like 5 times a week. She loves that. That's kind of her way to cleanse. But it's a lot about our intention and the intention that we're focusing on, right?
Yes. And I'm not against any of the herbs or anything you use for saging, but sometimes I got to be careful because I was making sure I didn't have no attention because I got hay fever and some of the stuff tears me up, man. It's not even I have no attention attachments. It's just hay fever,
I love using essential oil sage in Palo Santo. It's not as intense as the smoke. It doesn't sound
I can think almost everything but patchouli. Oh, that stuff is terrible.
We talked about cheese earlier.
If you want to get rid of me, put on some patchouli. That's just like kryptonite. I'll be gone like Superman. I promise you.
No. But so it's like just cleansing. And even I shared with some friends that they had some dowsing rods that they use when they do paranormal research.
Cool.
Just putting those on the earth. The earth can really also clear, and water running. Every time I have a client, I always go wash my hands. That's a way of disconnecting as well. Just, running. And I visualize that. You take a shower, visualize all that energy just rolling off you down through the drain. There's so many things that you can do to cleanse your energy. But if someone has a deeper attachment than just being able to clear it on their own, how can they reach out to you and schedule a session for you to dive a little bit deeper and pull out that deeper ingrained, attachment?
Well, it's crazy you asked me that. I did about a month ago a workshop with Alexis Brooks, and I was out of my realm of comfort. And, I didn't it's worse than telling people as a contactee. I didn't want people knowing I did this really, because I did it kind of privately around where I live. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think it would work and hypnosis would work remote through Zoom. Well, I found out the last few weeks that's incorrect. I've done several now through Zoom and found it's just as effective. So I'm now starting to do it. I'm going to announce to the people that are when that workshop first that I will do remote removals. And you can contact me through my email, barrylittleton13@gmail.com. And I've had to sort out my email, but now I'm getting back with people pretty quick. They're not all going to spam or whatever happens with that stuff. So. But that's the way. And I'm more than willing to help people because I think it's even more important than I thought it was in terms of the responses I've got from it has just blown me away. And from a lot of fellow hypnotists, some that have completely different training than me, asking me to help them with this. And that's blown me away because the level of consciousness and intelligence of people I've dealt with has always been high, but it's getting even more and more. I'm getting people that are so heavy coming towards me. It's like, whoa, it's kind of a trip. But that's, I think, is this shift in consciousness we're all always talking about.
It is. And
Did that answer your question, or was I just mumbling? Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question? Or was I just mumbling and going on?
No, that was good.
Doctor Who?
And you also have a YouTube channel, Barry Littleton, which I totally Jessica Jones had told me about it, and she said she binge watched it, and then I ended up binge watching it. And I love how they're just short. They're like these little less than 10-minute kind of little tidbits of information. I like that because sometimes people like these really long, podcasts because they drive and they listen, where I'm more of a little bite-sized pieces. And I love that about your YouTube, because it has little
Thank you.
bite-sized pieces, but it covers so many different topics, which is fascinating and awesome. So check out Barry's YouTube channel. If this topic interests you, because I know who's listening. If you've listened to this point, if you've been here for an hour, then you're probably going to like the other stuff on Barry's channel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And they're short because it's to spawn people that do their own research and their own through action. It's not even about me. I'm not that cool or that important, not even that smart. It just looks like that on YouTube, on cyberspace, so everyone go, do your own action and research. And it's the realm of action that changes things, truly. And I'm seeing so many people like that right now. It's blowing me away, and I consider it a blessing. And maybe this place isn't going to be a eternal prison planet. Sorry, just kidding.
Well, and it's important for us to understand that we hold the power within ourselves. We have the power and the ability to command these attachments off of us and to pull our power back into our body. And, we're sovereign beings, and we're all, beginning to wake up to this at many different stages and many different levels of our multidimensionality. And I think that's what's so exciting is, you learning from people, me learning from people, and sharing all these different perspectives. Because the way I look at it is we're all one. I like to use the analogy like we're all like one human body, but you may be the finger and I may be the toe. We're experiencing two different perspectives. However, we are all still a part of the same human body, right? So that's what I love about, learning and expanding our consciousness.
Yeah. It is fun. The more answers I get, the more questions I have. It's eternal, but things like we discuss here, the moving people and earthbound spirits on that are outside the energy field and inside. They're two different things, but they're just as important. And I don't know exactly what point it happens that they're attached to our outer energy field and they're, hey, and we don't hear it. We go on, and then finally they try to join. I don't know, or some of them may just try to join immediately. I don't know. I don't have the rule book, but we know it happens, so.
It does. And the best thing we can do is raise our vibration. I know for me, when I learned about these attachments, I started doing Qigong and energy expansion techniques and things to increase my aura and my light body. And the funny thing is I started to look at this like a research project, because when I started to expand my energy body, I began to notice that the people in my life that were really negative, that I used to attract, when I started to raise my vibration and expand my energy, those people would literally see me in the hallway, turn around and cut loose the other direction, And so I knew my energy was changing, and I was no longer like a magnet attracting those darker energies to me, or the negative energies. I had shifted polarities. I had started to attract more positivity into my life. So it really is just like you talked about, leading yourself into the heart, following that frequency of love, following the frequency of joy. I just did a podcast yesterday about manifesting in the joy frequency, because the more we laugh and the more we do things that bring us happiness, we raise our vibration. So if you're, in a crappy state and you're sad and you're miserable and depressed, you're more susceptible to having Swiss cheese aura and having these attachments. But the more you're living in a state of harmony and joy with your higher self, the more that you are naturally going to just repel these energies. You aren't going to attract them,
I saw Mimi on a bumper sticker a few weeks ago. One of those things that just, like Arsenio Hall used to say, things that make you go,
Yeah.
It said on it, it's very simple. It said, happiness is a choice.
Interesting.
Yeah, it makes you just kind of go, well, one of those things makes you think. It was a very nice sticker too, nice stuff around it, but just the words itself, happiness is a choice. And you think, wow, that's very true. When you really think about it,
It is, because if someone, say you're having a great morning and then you go about your day and someone yells at you in the parking lot, you have a choice to either lower your vibration and be miserable all day because someone let you have it in the parking lot, or you can be like me and blow it off. And I'm like, oh, you're just the Matrix trying to bring my vibe down. That's not happening, and then kind of laugh and walk away. I had to do that a few weeks ago.
or be like me, the old D Generation X, tell them to suck it.
When you laugh into that, it's not going to affect you. So just brush it off. And that's exactly it. Just do it in your own way, and brush it off and raise your vibration. And I think a lot of this is what we're mastering here on this planet, is learning how to hold that frequency. And it can be rough. Yeah. It can be hard to hold those higher vibrational frequencies. It's like, especially when the universe keeps sending these lessons at you, and you're like, oh man.
Down here, one is there is a major lack of compassion on this planet.
Yes. And
trauma walks around down here like a member of the population.
You're true. It's so true.
And you know what I found, especially in hypnosis and dealing with people's trauma from a past life they might be carrying, or even a trauma that they've been given from an ancestor that is transferred into their cellular structure. It's like, kind of the analogy I like is like a big thorn in the skin. Mm-hmm. You got that thorn in there. While it's in there, it's creating inflammation, infection, all sorts of stuff. But once you actually remove it, immediately the healing begins. Mm-hmm. And it may take a little time. When it finally heals up, you look on your desk, you've got that thorn. You say, God, it was a painful thing. That sucked. But you know what? It's no longer in the flesh created the inflammation. It's removed. You can examine it from the outside. It's different. The same type of reframing that occurs in hypnosis and EMDR is very beneficial in relieving past life trauma from this lifetime and others that you may not be aware of. I can't tell you how many times I met clients that have a fear of drowning. And then when you get them into way deep theta, they start talking about a past life and being in something that must be Atlantis and drowning there. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like that. I have always had this fear of claustrophobia. And so I am going to go into hypnosis because I'm convinced I was buried alive. I know I was probably some fiery witch back in Salem, and I just pissed some guy off and then they buried me alive or, whatever. I don't know, but I'm convinced of that because I have these panic attacks in tight spaces, and it's like, gosh, there's something about that I've got to dive a little bit deeper. And that's really the only thing that bubbles up for me sometimes. And I've, gone into my own theta and meditative state, and I've kind of dove in there, and that's the sense that I'm getting, but I need to dive. It's like an onion. You got to dive deeper and deeper. And that's where you and we can do that hypnosis or that guided theta meditation to get in there to figure out what the heck is it that's causing these issues in our physical reality. Because it's like you said, you're either leaning towards trauma or you're leaning towards healing. But you've got to choose, which direction, and based off of our beliefs, which if you think you're always in a state of suffering, then you're always going to feel like you're in a state of suffering. It's like you got to turn the light switch, on and say, all right, it's time for me to heal now. And now I'm in a state of healing.
We'll bring stuff to you. We'll track stuff like that to you,
Yes.
Depressive people, negative people. And right now we have to be so careful because this world, and especially these fields of new age and ufology, they're just ridden with people that are both mentally ill. It's like a flame to moth to flame. People that are mentally ill, some people that straight delusional, and other people that are just liars.
Yeah.
And the amount of time we have to using discernment on that is why we got to keep our protection up. These people that are telling us things we shouldn't do without knowing or experience themselves, we have to really use discernment. I can't say that enough.
I agree. And I think that's the key, is discernment, and feel it within your body. Does it feel right? Does it feel pure? Does it feel loving? If it doesn't, it's not. We got to learn to trust that gut instinct and our intuition. We've been so programmed as a society to disconnect, from our intuition, where it's like, thank you and I, when we tune into this intuitively, it's almost like it really strengthens it the more that you actually tune into it and stop putting it off, and so, this was a very interesting, topic of conversation. We've gone a little bit over an hour, so I'm going to start to wrap it up here. But so we've got your Barry Littleton 13@gmail.com, right?
Yes.
Yep. For people to reach out.
Yeah. YouTube channel also. It's just No cool handles, just Barry Littleton. It's been kind of shadow banned, so you got to type in the name, but it should come up. I'm also on Patreon under Barry Littleton, and I have a website, barrylittleton.com, but that's been forever in construction, but there's got links to my other social media on there. But
Perfect.
YouTube is a really big one. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube and even more stuff on Patreon.
Awesome. Well, this was really exciting. Thank you, Barry, for joining me on the show today. And thank you for doing what you do and shining your light. And I love to hear you laugh because it makes me laugh. And I think that that's just infectious in itself.
Somebody said, like my nephew used to say, you laugh like a bad guy. Being the merciless, that's me, you know. But thank you very much for having me, Tanya. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. And
you deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT Tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.